Introducing the world's easiest sourdough recipe. You're going to start with 330 grams of distilled water and 100 grams of active sourdough starter. You'll know that it's peaked if it's floating once you put it in the water. I filmed this before I had all my fun fancy tools, so we're going to use a fork to whisk that up. Anytime you add anything, don't forget to level your scale. I went ahead and added 500 grams of all-purpose unbleached flour. Now this part does get a little messy. I do have a Danish dough whisk now that I use that I love, but you can totally use your hands for this. We're going to combine everything, making sure that the sourdough starter gets absolutely everywhere. You'll massage the dough until it's shaggy, but it feels like it's one piece. We're gonna let that rest for about 15 minutes, and then we'll scale out 10 to 12 grams of salt. I'm gonna use wet fingers to pinch that in. It should feel sticky, but not sticking. Let the dough rest for 30 minutes, then we're gonna come back to it and do our first round of stretch and folds. The salt will be pulling the moisture out, but there are a million videos on this. Just make sure not to tear your dough. I probably do about 4 to 6 stretch and folds in the first round, just making sure the gluten gets strong enough. We're gonna let the dough rest for another 30 minutes, and then we're gonna do our second round of stretch and folds. I always try to do coil folds, but I don't really prefer them. I feel like it's easier to work the dough. After another 30 minutes of rest, we're going to do our third and final round of stretch and folds. The longer you let the dough rest, the more flexible it'll be. And by this time, I like to transfer it to a new bowl just because it's probably going to double in size. And to keep the moisture locked in, we're going to use saran wrap to cover it. This process is called bulk fermentation. We're going to let the dough sit for 8 to 10 hours. I'm going to slowly encourage the dough to come out because this is where we do our first round of shaping the dough. At this point, you really don't want your dough to tear, so you'll be very careful with it. We're going to work it into sort of a rectangle shape, and it helps to kind of shake the dough as you stretch it. And by this point, it should not be sticking to the counter. But for our first shape, we're gonna fold over one side of the dough, and then we're gonna fold the other side. And then my favorite part, we're gonna roll it like a cinnamon roll. And just for reference, I probably started this process about 10 a.m. So it's probably 8 p.m. by the time I'm recording this one clip. But anyways, after rolling the dough, we're gonna do what's called a push and tuck, or at least I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. We're creating some surface tension on the outside of the dough. And now that I'm a little bit more experienced, I normally will put it in the fridge at this point, but for the sake of the video, I left it out for about an hour and went ahead and did my second shape. This is the home stretch. You're just gonna do the same process all over again. Your dough might want to stick to that first shaping, but we're going to be really gentle with it. After the second round, we're going to do some more push and tucks. You'll probably see some bubbles from the fermentation process, but I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some flour to prevent the dough from sticking. I'm going to flip it upside down, put it in a bowl, and stick it in the fridge. Now it's the next morning. Even while the dough was in the fridge, it's continued to ferment. I believe it's called cold proofing, but it should fall out fairly easily without leaving anything on the bowl. I'm going to just shape it up really quick so it's a nice round little ball, and then we're going to stick it on a square of parchment paper. Make sure your Dutch oven has been in the oven at 450 for a whole hour before you put it in. I'm pretty sure it just ensures a nice even bake. I'm going to dust some flour on top, score it with a razor. For our first bake, I'm going to put some ice cubes underneath the parchment paper to create like a steam effect, and that's going to go in covered for about 20 minutes. And for the second baking round, we're going to take the top off and put it in for another 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 22 minutes for an extra crisp, but go ahead and listen to this sound. So good. I made sure to rest my bread for a whole hour before cutting into it. At this point, I didn't even have a sourdough cutter yet, or a bread knife for that matter.